Shalom and welcome to another lesson in the book of Joshua. The people of Israel are coming home. Today we will study chapter 16, Perek Tet Zayin. To remind us, the book of Joshua summarized the division of the land, the distributing of the different parts of the land on the eastern side of the Jordan River by Moses. We spoke about 2.5 tribes, Reuven, Gad, and half of Menashe. In our last lesson on chapter 15, we spoke about the huge populated area of Judah, who was the leader of the people, and he had in his segment of the land, in the part that he received, he had a variety of different parts of the topography of Israel. The hills, the valley, the Negev, the desert, the lowlands. And that was a major part of the land, Judah. Today, we're beginning 2 chapters that will deal with the story of Joseph. In the lesson today, we will begin with chapter 16. It's a very short chapter. It begins with the general tribe of Joseph, and then it will bring us back to the division of Joseph to 2 tribes. I'm reading verse 1. Vayetze hagoral livnei Yosef miyarden Yericho lemei Yericho mizracha hamidbar ole miricho bahar Bet El. And the portion that fell in a lot to the descendants of Joseph, meanwhile we were talking about Joseph as one tribe, it extended from the Jordan opposite Jericho to the waters of Jericho to the east. Here we are describing the border from the east to the west. We're talking about the southern border of Joseph. We are starting in from Jordan, Jericho, all the way through the waters of Jericho, through the desert, going up from Jericho, climbing the hill to Beit El. V'yatza mi Beit El Luza, ve'avar el gvul ha'arki Atarot. And it extends from Beit El to Luz. It was an interesting story because if we recall, in the book of Genesis, Jacob calls this place, which was originally called Luz, he names it Beit El. And I'm talking about the book of Genesis, chapter 28, verse 19. He named that place Beit El. However, Luz was the town's name originally. And that was in Genesis. Here, in the book of Joshua, it says the border goes from Beit El to Luz, which means that though Jacob changes the name to Beit El, apparently there's the ancient city still preserves the name Luz, and the newer city is called Beit El. So it goes from Beit El to Luz. Ve'avar el gvul ha'arkai Atarot, goes on to Atarot. Ve'yarad Yama, and it goes down to the west. El gvul ha'yafliti, ad gvul Beit Charon Tachton, ve'ad Gazer, Ve'hayu totzotav Yama. So we're the border which goes from the Dead Sea, from the Jordan River, all the way to the Mediterranean. And this is the southern border of the tribes. Meanwhile, it's the tribe, but we'll see in a few seconds that it becomes the tribes of Joseph. And then, verse 4, surprise. Vayinchalu b'nei Yosef Menashe ve'Ephraim. Joseph's sons, Menashe and Ephraim, received their inheritance. This brings us back to the book of Genesis. And here I want to point out that when we study these portions, these chapters in Joshua, of the division of the land, and giving each tribe its segment, we have to put in the back of our head, we have to remember all the time that everything here is written as if we're familiar with what is described in the book of Genesis, in the entire Torah. And if we recall towards the end of the book of Genesis, when Jacob is about coming close to the very last days, he calls upon his son, Joseph. And Joseph comes to him with his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And first Jacob blesses Joseph. I'm reading in chapter 48, verse 16. Hamalach hagoel oti mikol ra yevarech et haneharim. The angel who redeemed me from all evil, he will bless these youths. And they will be called by my name and my ancestors. V'yikarei behem shmi v'shem avotei Avraham v'Yitzchak. Named after my ancestors, Abraham and Isaac. But then there's a story. Vayar Yosef, ki yashit aviv yad mino al rosh Ephraim vayira be'einav. Joseph says that Jacob's right hand is on the head of Ephraim, and Jacob's left hand is on the head of Manasseh. And this bothers Joseph very much. Why? What does Joseph care? Let's go on one more second, and then we'll refer to the whole story here. Jacob blesses Manasseh and Ephraim, and he says, I'm reading verse 20, Vayivarchem bayomahu. He blessed them on this day. With you, Israel will bless, saying, may God make you like Ephraim and like Manasseh. Till this very day, in many Jewish houses, on Friday night, or on other occasions, and holidays, father approaches his children and he blesses them. You shall be like Ephraim and Manasseh. And the question that rises is why, what is so special about Ephraim and Manasseh? Why doesn't he say, you shall be like my two ancestors? Like the patriarchs, Abraham and Isaac. Why not like Moses? Like Aaron? I mean, there are many great things. What is so great, what is so special about Ephraim and Manasseh? And in order to understand the division of the land that is described here in Joshua 16, we must understand the whole story here. When Jacob wants to bless Ephraim and Manasseh, he puts his right hand on the head of Ephraim, who is the younger son, and then his left hand on the head of Manasseh, and he blesses them. Joseph sees this, and he almost goes crazy. No, please don't do that. Why? Towards the end of the book of Genesis, the people of Israel are stopping to be individuals, and they're about to become a nation. And throughout the entire book of Genesis, we go through a very interesting natural human behavior, but this natural human behavior brings upon us many, many tragedies. The very first time that one person kills another person in the book of Genesis, in the entire Torah, is where the two children, Cain and Abel, bring an offering to God. And God prefers the offering of the younger son of Abel. And I'm talking about in the book of Genesis. The story goes on in chapter 4. Abel and Cain both bring offerings, and God prefers Abel's offering. Cain gets very mad, and he kills his younger brother Abel. The story continues on within Abraham's family. The relationship between Abraham and the son of his brother Lot. The relationship between Isaac and Ishmael. The relationship between Jacob and Esau. All brothers throughout the entire book, till the very final story of Joseph, who is preferred by his father, and his older brothers sell him as a slave to Egypt. And here we are, Joseph sees his father blessing the younger son, and he says, no, we can't have this again. But Ephraim and Manasseh hear what's going on. And Manasseh hears his grandfather blessing him, his brother. And it says, Achiv hagaton yigdal mimenu. The younger brother will be even greater than the older one. And Menashe, fine, what's wrong with that? And now the people of Israel are ready to become a nation. When two brothers are happy with the fact that the younger brother doesn't care, or the older brother doesn't care that his younger brother is blessed. And at this point, Jacob says, Ephraim and Menashe, they're going to be like a tribe. They will be, even though Joseph is a son, his two children will become like tribes. And the whole story of dividing the land here between Ephraim and Menashe, where Ephraim will get his land before Menashe. And this is what we see in our chapter, where we stopped, in chapter 16 of the book of Joshua, where the story stops. We once, Vayinchalu b'nei Yisrael, Yosef, Menashe, Ephraim, verse 4. Menashe and Ephraim. Menashe is older. But who's going to get the land first? Verse 5. Vayihi gvul b'nei Ephraim l'mishpachotam. Ephraim is going to get first. He gets the privileges of the firstborn, even though he was second. And Menashe accepted this. And we will see in verse 9 here, V'ha'arim ha'mivdalot livnei Ephraim. There were cities belonging to the descendants of Ephraim that were enclaved within the inheritance of Menashe. Menashe and Ephraim lived like brothers. They lived one amongst themselves. We'll see that as we see it over here in the next chapter. In chapter 17, the same thing happens the opposite. In verse 8, L'Menashe hayta eretz tapuach, ve'tapuach el gvul Menashe livnei Ephraim. So here we have two brothers. They get their different portions of the land, but they don't care. They're willing to live together. And this will be the message that Jacob wants his descendants to know. Ephraim and Menashe, they are like tribes, and all the people of Israel will bless their children. They shall be like Ephraim and Menashe. They shall live like brothers. And here, when we are dividing the land, Joshua reminds us of the story that even though Menashe is the older son, he's giving out the first part to Ephraim. And finally, in verse 10, V'lo horishu et hakna'ani hayoshev begezer. Just like we saw in the story with the descendants of Judah. V'et hayivusi yoshvei Yerushalayim lo yachlu b'nei Yehudah Yerusham. Even though these tribes are taking their part, there were still those in the land that they did not manage to overcome. In the tribe of Judah, it was the people of Yevus, the Yevusites, and they inhabited in Jerusalem. And in this chapter, chapter 16, we're talking about the tribe of Ephraim, who does not manage to overcome the Canaanites of Gezer and the Canaanites of Beit Horon, the area. They did not manage to overcome, to banish the Canaanites living in Gezer. And we will see the same thing happens in Menashe. Because even these tribes, the strong tribes of Judah and Joseph, are still remaining with Canaanites that are living amongst them. So here we are, returning to the blessings of Jacob that are part of the people till the day of the dividing of the land. And Joshua in the footsteps of the blessing of Jacob. He says, Ephraim will be before Menashe. And we will see that Menashe is awarded for this. And this we will see in our next lesson. Shalom.